All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm kind of excited about doing this. This is something that has been on my radar for quite a while, thinking that what a great way to really service our members with being able to do this remotely, as well as being able to record it so that they can play it back and see the meeting if they weren't able to do it on the day or attend live. They can log on to it and see it at a later date. So we're going to play with this and see how it works. Everything's working all right so far, guys?
Yep, everything's good.
All right. All right. Well, what I'm going to be showing you today is a little spinning top. This is something that has evolved. First time I made one of these was with Guy Schaefer at the American Craft Society or American Craft Council show in St. Paul about 4 years ago, guys.
Yeah,
something like that.
3-4 years.
We started out doing baseball bats, and they took a little bit longer, so I started making these. I came from a production background in my career of about 40 plus years, and I'm fascinated with production. I love production, and this was an opportunity to do a wood turning project in a production mode, and that's what I wanted to show you today. Everyone loves the one-offs. I enjoy that too, but for me, I get a real joy out of production. So this is how I'm going to show my production process with this. So you'll be able to get a link to a handout that Fred can post on the website, or contact me directly. I can send you a PDF of that goes over everything that I'll be doing today. So to get started with, everything that I do with these tops, I did pre-thought about it and refined it and tested it and came up with what I'm doing. So to start out with, what I do is I kind of like the look of the variation of color with between black or walnut and cherry. And I had a lot of scrap around my shop. So that's what I started out doing. So the first thing you want to do is cut out 2 pieces of walnut, 2 pieces of cherry on your table saw or bandsaw. What I came up with is I do have the advantage of having a 14-inch tool rest. So the size that works for me is a 12-inch piece of wood, so that I can rough that off without taking the time to slide my banjo back and forth, and I can pick up a little more production by doing it that way. So the process is to glue 2 sets of walnut and cherry, clamp those, let them dry. You need to flatten them off so you have a nice glue edge. You can do that with a hand plane, with a joiner. I have a drum sander that I run mine through, but flatten that out. At the worst case would be you run it back through your table saw with a good sharp blade, and you'll have a good enough edge for a glue. After the 2 sections of 2 are glued, you glue the 4 together after they're flattened. Let them dry. Titebond glue. I use the Titebond glue number 3. The reason I use that is the characteristics of it drying a little bit darker, so it hides any blemishes a little bit more. I then go to the lathe and turn it into a round billet. So working with 1-inch material, which I get direct from the sawmill at about 7/8 of an inch plane, that works for me. You'll see in my handout some of them, if I go to the big box store and buy 3/4 inch lumber, that's a true 3/4 inch. Then I've added a little bit of walnut, or pardon me, maple to the middle of it to extend it, make it a little bit bigger. Because why I do that, I find that my Talon chuck with the number 2 jaws fit this billet nice. So that's why I came up with that size. Next thing I need to do is cut these into segments. So I've got in my plan, it talks about starting out with a 13-inch billet so that I can cut them flush to go to the lathe. Roughing gouge, nothing fancy, just rough it out, get it round. Then I'm going to go to my bandsaw I strongly recommend that you build yourself a V-block. And I did that on my table saw, setting the blade at a 45-degree angle, running it through the rip fence one way, halfway through the thickness of the wood, flipping it over, running it to the other way. And that gave me my V-block. I used some spray adhesive to put some 80 grit sandpaper in the V. What that does is it helps it from twisting. I think many of you can relate by experience. You don't want to take a round piece of wood and go into your bandsaw. I guarantee you it'll work for you several times, but eventually when you hit that turning blade, it's going to bite into the wood and spin it right out of your hands, take it sideways. And I'm speaking of experience. I've damaged a $36 blade that I don't want to do again. So I came up with the V-block. That's working out well for me. Another thing that it's not so critical on a bandsaw, but very critical on a table saw is using an auxiliary fence that's set so that it extends the wood further out, so you've got a bigger gap in between the blade and the fence as the piece of wood comes out. I think that's critical. I strongly recommend that, and it works out real well. I'll cut a few off just so you can see how it runs or how it works. So production-wise, I can go through that billet fairly quick and come up with approximately, they're about 1 inch thick, so I'll have at least 12 or at least 11 blanks. So now we're going to go over to the lathe. All right, everyone with me yet? All right, so I'm using a Talon chuck with a number 2 jaws. That works well for my billet that's approximately an inch and 3/4 diameter. So I'll put that into my Talon. The reason I like the 1 inch is it gives me some protrusion out from the jaws so that I can begin working the face of the top of the top, which I'll finish first. And I give it a little concave, and there's a reason why I do that. I find that that gives me a better target when I come in with the drill bit to drill the hole for the dowel. I'm using a hardwood dowel, a 5/16 dowel, and that gives me a little bit of funnels to bring that drill bit into the center. I'm going to start out, I'm going to do a little bit of facing, a little bit of surfacing. I do always wear my face mask. I will try it today and see what kind of echoing we get with my my AirPods. That sound okay to everyone?
Yep.
Little echo. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out. I'm going to round the corners and give it a little bit of an indent. And you'll see what I mean. I'm coming in and rolling my gouge over as I come around the corner, and then I'll go in to the center. It's important that you try to get that little nubbin out in the center of that. That can cause problems when it comes to drilling it. If there's a little knob in the middle, a nubbin that I guess is what some of us call it, that can deflect the drill bit and you'll get an off-center hole. So try to get that out. The next thing I'm going to do is just take time to put a little sandpaper to it. Good old 3M sandpaper, a boost there for Jim Broad online. So I'm going to sand it with 150. Hit it again with 220. And for what I'm doing, that's good enough. I have made somewhere between 800 and 1,000 of these tops in the last 3 years. These are something that I do when I'm asked to do a demonstration at a art show or at the American Craft Council, and we're handing them out as fast as we make them. We know that these are going to go to kids in strollers. that what do kids and strollers do? First thing, it goes into their mouth. So I'm very cautious and conscious of the finish that I use. So I've come up with the finish that I make up myself. In the handout, you'll have some hyperlinks that'll take you to Amazon where you can buy the products that I use and make your own. It's basically the same thing that Mike Mahoney sells as a bowl finisher. It's carnauba wax, which is hardest natural wax available. It's a wax that's used in products like lip balm. It's what makes M&Ms melt in your mouth, not in your hands. So it is a very safe, and you know, I'm not even afraid to taste it. But no, seriously, it's a very safe finish, and one that I'd recommend you use for something like this. The other thing that's important about the evolution of this top when I started making them is that the federal government has some guidelines in making of toys. And what they've come up with, and a good way to help people like you and I that are makers, is that the diameter of the piece should not fit through the cardboard core of a roll of toilet paper. That's just kind of a rule of thumbs, so that someone can't get it in their mouth and swallow it. So I'm very conscious that I want to make that size at least that big, that it won't fit to that core of a toilet paper, paper towel, or something like that. All right, so the finish, at this point, I want to put the finish on the top. And I can just put that on with my finger. I'll rub it in a little bit. I'm going to put some rotation to my lathe and buff that wax in. Running it slow, I've got it spread out. Now I can speed it up. And I'll buff it right in. So why am I doing it now? Because my next step is to run my drill bit through to make the hole for the dowel. And if I waxed it after the fact, it's very difficult to wax around the dowel that's glued in there. If I drill the hole through and then wax it, or before I put the dowel in, I'm going to be pushing wax down the hole, so I won't get the bond that I want with the glue. So I want to wax it at that point. I'm going to go in. Comment about dowels in general. I use a hardwood dowel. Make sure you look at that. I think the softwood, the popples would work as well, but I feel a little more comfortable with longevity if I use a hardwood like a maple. So check that out. The other thing that I'm finding is I can go to 3 different stores, come home and use a micrometer and check the diameter of these dowels, and they all vary just a little bit. So a 7/16 dowel I'm finding is a little bit undersized. So if I drilled the hole with a 3/16 inch dowel, or 5/16, pardon me, 5/16 dowel, the wood dowel itself would probably drop right through. So I'm using a standard twist bit, what a machinist might use, or what you'd have out in your garage. I use that, and I go 1/64th lower than the 15/16, whatever that number is. That's been working out well for me. All right, so I'm going to slow the speed down, and I'm going to proceed to drill this hole through it. I lock my tool rest, or my tailstock down. I put a little bit of pressure on the quill just to take any of the slop out of the quill itself that could cause a bounce. I'll get it in there. Once I've started and I see my drill bits running good, I'll just go ahead and go through it. So the next step that I'm going to do is put the dowel. I'll put the dowel in it at this point. The dowel's about 1 3/4 inches long. I do the same steps that I did on the billet of the walnut and cherry, using the auxiliary fence, using the V-block to cut my dowels out. setting the rip fence to 1 3/4 inches. What I'll also do in a production type mentality is I chamfer the edge of my 36-inch long dowel. And I can do that real easily. I'm going to be changing chucks anyway, so I'll show you what I'll do is I make up a faceplate to fit a self-adhesive 12-inch piece of abrasive. Looks something like this.
Gary, how deep do you drill your hole into your...
All the way through. It'll go all the way through. Good question there, Fred. The other thing that I made up is a flat platform. I made mine out of steel. You could make yours out of a wooden dowel to fit your post size, and creating something that will keep you at a 90-degree angle to the grinder. I can slow that down, and now what I'll do is I'll leave my lathe idling. I'll come in and just do a quick roll. I'll go over to the bandsaw, cut it off, let those lay there, come back to the lathe, do it again, go back to the bandsaw, cut them off, keep going back and forth until my 36-inch dowel is down to 1 3/4 inches, and I'm done.
Gary,
Yes.
I'm just gonna, I've been making some of these, and I've got a brand new pencil sharpener, and I just run it through my pencil sharpener and give it a couple cranks, and cut them all up short, and then just do that. So lots of
I was going to comment on that too. The only thing I didn't like about that is the pencil sharpener works fine, but it's still a kind of a sharp edge.
Yep.
I just didn't like it. I wanted a rounder edge. Absolutely, personal preference, whatever you like. But you're right, Guy. That's a good, quick way of doing it. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So now I've got my dowel pins cut out. I have my blanks. I would be doing this and making these up. I'd probably make at least 50 at a time. And now I would glue the dowels into this half-finished top. So what I'll do is very simply add a little bit of, I'll have some glue on a piece of cardboard or paper. Little pile of glue there. I'll take my dowel on the non-chamfered edge, put it in there, line it up in the hole, drive it home. I like to use some thicker cardboard because I don't have a problem with that protruding just a little bit. So that's how I'll do that. Another added advantage is for me putting that wax on at that earlier step is that if I want to go in and clean up that glue, it doesn't stick to the wood. Had I done it the other way, I might have had a discoloration with the glue going on before the wax. So that works out well. So again, I'll be making up about 50 of them to that point. And then I'm going to switch my lathe over to a lathe with some pin jaws on it. I started out, the first time I made these, I was using 1/4 inch dowels. And I almost got caught when I went to a show where I was using somebody's lathe that had a Nova chuck with pin jaws on, and the Nova chuck doesn't get down small enough to hold the 1/4 inch dowel. So luckily someone had a Talon chuck, and the Talon will go down to a 1/4 inch, but what it did for me is I increased the diameter of the dowel from a 1/4 inch to the 5/16 to prevent that from happening if I get into a Nova chuck situation. All right. So after the glue dries, you've got your dowel, you've got the top finished, and with the pin jaws, I can go in there and snug it up. When I say snug, if I put too much torque on that, I will damage that dowel. So it's a learning experience on about how much pressure you need And by using sharp tools, we can finish that without putting any blemish to that dowel.
Gary,
All right.
from Bob here.
Yes.
Pin jaws versus, I don't have pin jaws. Jacob's chuck, is that suitable?
I have, very good question. I've tried the Jacob's chuck and that works, but it was a little bit, because the face of it is so much smaller, because a Jacob's chuck, you want to get down to about a 1/16 of an inch drill bit or smaller. It damages the dowel a little bit more. Now, for one person's damage could be an embellishment to a buyer when they're going to look at that and say, hey, that gives me some grip to spin on. So if that's what you got, go for it. I think that would work fine. There might be some other steps you could do, such as wrapping some masking tape around it. That might help. Try it. All right. So I'm back to the lathe. Again, holding it with the pin jaws. I'll go to my echo. And now I'm going to come in and just shape that. There is no absolute right or wrong way. I tend to go more with some radius to mine. Others, I've done some with going concave and out. It's all up to you. So I'll just go through and do my standard. So what I want to do is I want to start off from about where I had left off on the first half, and I'll bring that down until I get a sharp point on the dowel. The dowel will actually be the contact point when the top is spinning. Here's an example where it wasn't quite tight enough. It spun on me. Just a little bit more.
Say, Gary, have you ever tried using a collet chuck?
I don't have one, so no. If you've got one, absolutely. Another advantage of doing it this way is that if my hole was a little bit off center when I drilled it, by holding the dowel, I can take all that irregularity or out of roundness out of it. One more pass. Now I'm going to slow the lathe down, and I'm going to go back to my 150 sandpaper. And then I'll go to my 220. Interesting thing, found through experience. If you have a top and make that point too sharp, it's not going to spin as nicely as one that is slightly blunted or rounded. So play with that if you're going to try these too. I think a slightly blunted, rounded tip works a whole lot better. At that point now, I'll go back to, I'm just going to apply the wax while it's spinning. We'll speed up, so put some RPMs behind it and actually buff that wax in there. So no damage was done to the dowel when it spun. It polished it a little bit, but and you got yourself a top. If I were doing this in a production mode, like I say, I'm doing 50 at a time. I can go through these. I'll get them to that point where it looks like this. I bag those up, and that's what I bring to the show or to the demonstration when I'm doing it for the public, so that at that point I just go to the pin jaws, face it off, wax it up, buff it, and hand it out. And I don't know, Guy, do you remember if you timed me at the American Craft Council a few years
I can't
back.
remember. I know we were whipping them off pretty quick.
Yeah, it was less than 2 minutes. It was about
Yeah.
a minute 30 some seconds, and we were handing them out. And then we had a lineup, and we were putting through these as fast as we were making them. Very successful product line for me as well. It's something that if you're in a gallery, you definitely would like to sell those high-end pieces, but you also have the demographics or the buying public that walks in there would love to support the organization, but don't have the $200-300 to buy a bowl or a hollow form. They see one of these sitting on the counter for $5, and they're snapped up. I've got a gallery here in St. Cloud that I sell these at, and the checkout or the clerk there or the worker, they said, as soon as I see somebody walking to the counter, I get one spinning, and they'll buy the piece that they're buying, and I can see them continue to eye that top that's continuing to spin. And before the transaction is over, they'll say, how much are those? I'll take 2 or 3 of those. I also had one feel-good experience, and that was when I was at the AAW Gallery of Wood Art at Landmark Center, and I was making these and handing them out. That was a year ago on St. Patrick's Day. And a gentleman came up to me and watched me, and I handed him one, and he thanked me, and he looked at it and turned around, and he turned back and came to me and he said, what do you sell these for? And I said, $5. And he said, can I buy 100 of them? And I said, well, yeah, I could definitely do a better price for 100. What 100? When do you need them by? And they said, I need them this fall. And went on to explain that he has a daughter that has a learning disability that she is, it has to do with she is just deathly shy to a point where she can't communicate with people, a new person. And he said, we sponsor a barbecue in fall where we try to find something to give her that she needs to go out and give to the public. And he said, with the whole organization that have similar kids come to this, it's a big deal. It's in Buffalo, Minnesota. They all come, and she's able to go up, and it's a simple thing that she could show the person, spin it for them, and tell them about it and give it to them. And he was just thrilled with it. So I felt pretty good about that. Hey, that's it. That's exactly what I do production wise, and I can put these out fairly quickly, and people love them. So go to our website. Fred, you can, I don't know if you want to send that out by email or by just a link on the website. If you guys can't find it, contact me direct. If you would like that PDF, I'd be happy to send that to you. And that concludes my demonstration. Any questions?